Welcome to Through the Fire with Angelina Paul, a space where every story matters, every voice is honored, and no journey is left untold. I am your host, Angelina Paul, and together we will explore the transformative power of storytelling as a pathway to healing, resilience, and unshakable faith. This podcast is more than a conversation. It's building a community, a sanctuary for those who have walked through life's fiercest fires and emerged with courage, wisdom, and a story that deserves to be shared. Here we embrace the idea that adversity doesn't define us, it refines us, setting the stage for the encore of our lives. So whether you are searching for hope, connection, or the courage to step into your next chapter, you have come to the right place. Let's journey together through the flames, uncovering the beauty of redemption, restoration, and the unbreakable human spirit. So welcome to Through the Fire with Angelina Paul. Today I have Susan. And so Susan, before I even say who you are, this is what I wanted to start this episode with today. I wanted to start this episode with gratitude. So I wanted to tell you, when I spoke with you and you shared your story with me, how that impacted me. I want to say it this way. I'm grateful for your life. You know, I've heard people say that so many times. I'm grateful for your life. And I've never really understood what that meant. And I think I got a version of what that means for me after I spoke with you. I realized that all of us, when we're going through life and we are celebrating things and we're being honored, we're being respected, we're being loved, and we fail and we go through adversity and we're crying and we're going through pain and trauma, that we're all running toward something or someone. And it's always many things at a time that we're going toward. And I realized that your journey, what you've endured and all that you shared with me, I believe that you were, or I would say it this way, that I was one of those things that you were running toward. So I'm grateful for your life, that you've been able to endure all that you've endured, and that you have been celebrated in the places that you shared with me, and that you were able to go through all this so that we could have this moment. It's almost like I feel like saying, thank you for finding me. And I'm happy that I've gone through what I've gone through because I've been able to find you. And we were running toward this experience today, right to the very last moment till we sat down and we're having all these conversations. We were coming to this moment. So I wanted to start there and say just thank you. Thank you for your life.
Thank you.
I'm grateful for your life.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
I know you are. So Susan, you are a daughter, you're a sister, you're a twin, and that's always fascinating for me. I wish I was a twin. You're a wife and a mom of 3 girls, 4 girls, and all these different roles come with so much responsibility, and you're thriving. Honestly, I feel like just by saying that, we could shut down the episode and be like, this is resilience personified. We can go home, right? But I want to talk about your 3-year-old daughter, Raven. When I spoke with you, you described her as a beacon of light. So Raven has a terminal DNA repair disorder called Cockayne that only 1 or 2 children in a million a year are diagnosed. I want to ask this question. Can you take us back to the moment you received the diagnosis? What were you feeling in that instant, and how did you process it afterward?
So first of all, during this, it was during COVID. So times were already a little bit difficult in that regard because we were still shunned in a lot. So they sent me an email. The genetics department for BC Children's Hospital sent me an email, and they said that they wanted to have a discussion with both my husband and myself present, but it was a work day. So my husband was working and I told them that, he can't be here. So just call and talk to me. And so we arranged a time and they phoned. And I spoke to the geneticist and it was a very quick conversation. And he told me she has this DNA disorder called, well, I call it Cockayne Syndrome. And he basically just gave me a very brief run through of it. So it was, keep certain chemicals away from her, keep her out of the sun. And if you're going to bring her in the sun, make sure she's covered, sunscreen, all that. And then he kind of just rushed through the rest of the conversation and hung up the phone after about 5 minutes. And I kind of sat there not really taking it all in because it was just so sudden and so quick.
Yeah.
And then literally like 30 seconds later, his genetic counselor called me back and she apologizes. She was like, I don't think that was really a proper way to handle that conversation.
I know. Like an email and then a phone call and then a little bit of information and done.
Yeah. So, I felt like I had a lot of questions that were now needing to be answered. And the counselor had gone through it again with me. So she kind of, went over the same things that the geneticist had talked to me about. But even then, after I got off the phone with her, I was still like, I have no idea what
that is.
Door has just opened in front of me. So,
oh my gosh. And so you mentioned to me that after this happened, you turned to Google to find out more about what you just heard. I want to know what you found out on Google and how did it feel to make that discovery on your own without the support of that doctor?
So I know that a lot of people don't really like to go to Wikipedia specifically for information because it has been known for
I do.
being false.
I totally do.
So anyways, I Googled it and there is not a whole lot of research already on it. And so when the Wikipedia article popped up, I clicked on it and, the first line that you see on the site was, it's an autosomal recessive terminal disorder. And I was stunned because I feel like that's something that you would remember.
If somebody had told you over the phone that your child has a terminal disorder, you would remember that.
I feel like I would.
Yeah.
And so I kind of sat there in stunned silence, looking at my phone going, oh my God. And then when you carry on with the research, there is kind of varying degrees of like when the kids do pass away from it. So I saw that we pretty much have a window from 5 years to 10 years. And that also kind of hit, fairly hard. So
what are your initial thoughts as a mother? You've learned the severity of your daughter's condition. What are you thinking?
In a way, I guess it kind of did provide some relief because, I would look at her. She was 8-9 months old when we got the diagnosis. So then it was kind of like, we finally have some answers in that regard. Now we can move forward with any type of medical care that she may need. And we could do it with ease, knowing that we can, provide for her, pain medications and stuff like that. If she's experiencing pain or if she requires medication for anything else, we have some literature in front of us that, we can go through with our doctors.
So do you call the doctor back and say, hey, why wouldn't you say this to me? Or do you just say, okay, I have this information, I've got a diagnosis, at least I know what I'm able to do for my daughter somewhat moving forward, and I'm just going to jump right into that and move on?
Actually, I feel like at the time we got the diagnosis, our pediatrician that we had was a bit of a saving grace. She actually had given me her personal phone number for her phone and I was able to text her. And so she got the paperwork, after a day or two, and she actually texted me and she apologized, profusely over that message. And, she's like, I'm so sorry. I was not expecting this. And I don't think, in the grand scheme of things, no one's really expecting to receive a diagnosis like this, especially for their child.
Over the phone.
Yeah.
It really reminds me, I've shared with you that my oldest daughter at 24 passed away from brain cancer. And I had traveled to Edmonton for an event, and I was going to surprise my daughter. Again, it was during COVID. And I thought, I'm finally able to get out the house, go on a plane and go to Edmonton. I'm not going to tell her that I'm coming. I'm going to surprise her. And just a few minutes in me arriving in Edmonton, my phone starts buzzing. Like her friends are texting me, messaging me that she's been taken to the hospital. She's critical. You need to come over. They don't know that I'm already in Edmonton. But I'll fast forward to this, just, relating to what you're talking about, getting such a diagnosis over the phone and emails. And then, after the fact, getting an apology. I was also told over the phone. So my daughter, because she was 24, there was always this pull that happened right till the very end where I kept trying to explain to the doctors that, yes, she is an adult, but right now, because of what she's going through, I'm a caregiver. So if there's any new development with anything that's happening, you share it with me. So they didn't, they told me the diagnosis after they told her, and they told me on the phone. So it was in that way of like, well, you're the second person we're getting to tell. Not even as you're her mother who's going to have to take care of her and make decisions for her. And I don't think for me, like just thinking of the question I asked you, what were you thinking as a mom? In that moment, I didn't really digest how this is so horrible that somebody would do that to another person, share such news over the phone. But I think the moment that it hit me is when my daughter came home and we were making our way to come to BC, to Kelowna. She said to me, Mom, you know what they said? I don't have cancer. I watch, what show did I watch Grey's Anatomy. So I don't have cancer. That made me so emotional. I was like, my girl doesn't even really know. They were telling someone with a tumor the size of an orange in her head, this horrible diagnosis, and then just telling the mom passively. And I realized at that moment that we hadn't been given the diagnosis in the manner that we should have. I think I should have been there, and my daughter and my husband, and them really explaining to us, and me ensuring that my daughter actually understands. So I really do resonate with that. You mentioned something when we were talking about pre-parenting beliefs.
Oh, yes.
And that statement just really stuck out to me. What were your pre-parenting beliefs, and what was it that made you form those beliefs? Like before this diagnosis, before this happened, what were your beliefs of being a parent?
See, well, I never actually really had a whole lot of experience with kids growing up. So I knew how to change a diaper, but it wasn't like, being around kids resonated anything in me. So, when my twin sister and I had talked about wanting to be parents in the future, of course, in our naive beliefs, we're like, oh, I hope I never have a disabled child because we would never know how to take care of it. Yeah. And so, I went on and I had 3 healthy kids. Yeah. And, so it was also at the, it never really crossed my mind. And
so
then
you're like, yeah, what my sister and I talked about is happening. I have my babies. Yeah. They're good. They're healthy.
Yeah. And then I got pregnant with Raven. And then, it was a bit of a different pregnancy, not in ways that I would have expected something was wrong. Yeah. But then I had her, and then it was like something is a little different about her. So then, in the 8 months that it took to get her diagnosis, these little things just connected, and then it was like, oh, and now I have a disabled daughter.
Wow. So you also said that, having a disabled child is not a jail sentence. So just like you shared, you and your sister were like, we don't know what we would do if any of our children were disabled. But now you are this parent saying it's not a jail sentence. What does that mean to you now compared to what you might have believed before? becoming a parent?
Well, I think that I just, I didn't really know the aspects of, things available for parents. Like in Kelowna, we now have the FCC for children who require extra supports, and Starbright for those as well.
Yeah.
So once I had Raven, we immediately were getting connected with Starbright because the FCC actually wasn't a thing.
What's Starbright? I'm not familiar with them. What do they do to help you?
Starbright is a children's development center.
Okay.
And it's a nonprofit organization, so you actually don't have to pay out of pocket for services.
Yeah.
So you can go there, and they do have an extensive wait list, but given that Raven wasn't meeting any of her milestones, we got in fairly easily.
Yeah.
So she was set up with a speech pathologist, into infant development, occupational therapist, a physiotherapist. And
so you feel like all of these things that are supporting you is why you feel like it's not a jail sentence, because there are facilities that can help you. There are resources that are out there. And so is it your feeling right now that being in British Columbia, specifically in Kelowna, that you do have the support that you need to be a parent of a disabled child?
I have the support of our medical staff.
Okay.
I don't necessarily have the support of like family and friends.
Okay.
It feels that way anyways.
Great. So what would support of family and friends look like for you, Raven?
I would, sometimes it would just be nice to have more friends, call up and say, hey, I'm going to come over and bring coffee. I'll help wash your dishes, or, bring you guys a meal to have for dinner, something like that.
Do you think that you have accepted that you have Raven, who's a disabled child, but that your family and friends haven't, or they don't know how to?
I think they just don't know how to be honest. I think, in a lot of ways, we're not really brought up to be involved with, a lot of other people with disabilities. There are still kind of, when I went to school, they were, kept in a separate room to be taught. And, the rest of us would be in our classrooms. So I think that doesn't really help when you're already not really around a lot of people with disabilities. And when you think about it now, it's really frustrating, and it's sad that, these kids don't have, we as kids didn't have experience growing up.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it would have helped a lot of people with, their tolerance, and be like, oh, I see a disabled kid and I see a mother struggling to regulate their child, and now I can step in and
That's
help.
actually good that you're mentioning that, because I'm thinking about it too. Even for me in Africa, like typically children that had disabilities where they were just treated, almost shunned would be the word that I would say. It was as if it was like, keep them away from the other kids. So I would say that if I was in your same situation, I would probably respond the same way, because I don't know. Like it was just, you hardly saw them. They were not in your class. They're not around with you when you're playing. And so there was just no way. So I can see that way. Now you're a parent, and it's like, very confronting at that moment. You have to deal with it. What would it mean for you to have the support of like friends and family?
I think it would just be nice to kind of feel more support in that way. Because, I think it was hard during COVID too, because, we were already alone. So a lot of the times we were struggling with her diagnosis alone.
Yeah.
And then once COVID regulations lifted, we were still kind of alone, and, so I feel like
you feel alone.
Yeah.
Because your friends and your family haven't done, at least in your opinion, enough to be there and to support you.
Yeah. So because Raven's G-tube fed last year, so she was 2.
So tell me what's G2 fed.
Oh, she's
just in case our listeners, someone is like, I don't know what that means.
It's called a gastronomy tube, and it's just a little feeding tube that's surgically implanted through the stomach.
So she doesn't eat like we do.
No,
she eats through the tube.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
And so she was 2 last year, and my husband's Christmas party had come up, and it was the first time that my mom actually was willing to come up and babysit all 4 of the girls and watch Raven for us. So it was kind of difficult, going that long until someone was finally willing to help
be there
and actually watch Raven.
So when you were, let me ask you this: when you had your first 3 children, your healthy children, did you have that support from friends and family?
Not really, no.
Oh.
Like my mom would come up and she would stay a night or two, and and she would help me with the kids, make sure the place is clean, dishes are done, and all that. But she never really spent that much time actually until I had Raven, and she needed to come in and babysit the girls a few times so that I could take Raven to appointments and go to Vancouver even for some of her appointments.
Wow. So what I'm thinking is probably with your first 3, it was okay.
Yeah.
But now it's not okay.
Yeah.
So it's almost like that thing where you wish you had maybe said something.
Yeah.
Before that, hey guys, it's not okay. I need you. I need your support.
Yeah.
And then maybe the transition would have been better.
I think so. Yeah.
When Raven came. So what have been some of your most difficult days caring for your daughter, and what gets you through those moments?
I find some of the hardest moments were because we co-sleep. So I would, I would get up in the morning and she was sometimes still asleep. And then I would turn and I look at her and, she's sleeping away. It's almost like, she doesn't have a care in the world. And she just looked so peaceful and calm and quiet and beautiful. And I would sit there and be like, this isn't fair. This really isn't fair. And it's hard when you're looking at your child knowing that you don't even have a timeline, really. You have like maybe another year or 2 or 3 left.
You just don't know.
And you're just staring at her.
Yeah. What you're talking about, you said something, it's my question about difficult days. I know that the way you answered it to me means that it's not difficult for you to take care of your daughter.
It is not.
It's not difficult at all for you to take care of your daughter, at least not in the way that we who are not in the same situation would define difficult. You mentioned when you were talking to me that, sometimes you wake up in the morning, you let her sleep, you change her food bag, you give her a meds, and then you would snuggle with her.
Yeah.
And then you said that sometimes as you're admiring her, you're thinking, maybe she does understand what's happening in the world. But then when you think that she doesn't understand, she seems more innocent when she doesn't understand. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, it's really hard to
What is
explain.
it about this world that you say Raven is better off at times not understanding?
Well, because I think it just shows in a way, and I think maybe I'm speaking for Kelowna itself, it's not a very accessible place in terms of disabled people. Yeah. And, so it's just easier for her to just have other people fighting for her. And she doesn't have to worry about it. She can just sit there and sleep.
Do you
or
think
be
we're fighting in this world every day as we are living our lives?
I feel like it.
Yeah.
And
what's the biggest fight for you?
I don't know. I've never actually had anybody ask me that.
Well, here's anybody and anybody is asking. What is the fight for you? The fight that you say, thank God Raven doesn't have to fight this fight.
This isn't the first time that I've actually talked about her disorder. It is on a podcast though. But I think in a way she's kind of made me stronger in the terms of like accessibility, because I was standing up for Starbright when the FCC was threatening to shut them down. Yeah. And I stood in front of our ball community and talked to them about BC Children's and what it means to us. So in a way, I've kind of become a bit of an advocate.
Right.
And I never thought I would be.
Raven's life has given you purpose.
Yeah.
And it's a fight that you're happy to fight.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
That Raven doesn't have to fight this fight, or doesn't even have to know.
Yeah. And I think when
you're fighting this fight.
Yeah. And I think when you have a child with a very rare disorder too, it makes more sense to stand up and talk about it, because people don't know about it. And when you can talk about it, you get the word out, and people are now more aware of the struggles and other disabilities that are here and present. They may not just affect you.
Right. That's like what's happening with Starbright. Like I'm just happy to hear that part that you were able to see the value and to stand up and really stand with them for what they're doing. What are some of the other facilities that help you take care of Raven outside of Starbright?
We have to go to BC Children's every 6 months for some follow-ups.
Okay.
So, we are connected with like the social workers and the Indigenous liaisons down there. So they help, provide some support.
Right.
Especially when we're making our impromptu trips down to Vancouver.
Right. So your husband is Indigenous.
Yes.
And so you have some resources that come from the Indigenous community.
Yes. And specifically his band over in Hope.
Okay. So how do you balance caring for your daughter and then supporting your other children and your marriage?
Thankfully my husband and I are fairly laid back people. So, we will tend to our needs as needed. Yeah. But the upside of Raven's disability is that she's actually incredibly tiny for her age. So it's like she's a baby, even though she's 3. So we could just put her in her car seat sometimes or in her special seats,
right.
Then I can, help the girls, with homework or art or sit and listen to them if they want to talk to me about something that happened at school.
So you're still fairly involved with taking care of your other children, and you feel that you're holding that out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really good to know. So what conversations have you had with the other children about their sister's condition, and how do they express their love toward Raven?
Well, they fortunately don't know right now how devastating this will be. But, from the get-go, I was trying to be very open with the girls because Raven is different. So I had to tell them, you can't jerk her around. You have to be careful when you play with her or you're going to hurt her.
Yeah.
And due to this disability, Raven is visually and hearing impaired. So if you want to communicate with her, she needs to wear her glasses and she needs to wear her hearing aids so she can hear you. So, so the girls are aware of the fact that she has a disorder. They just don't know how severe it is yet.
Right. And do you think that the time will come that you have that conversation with the other girls?
Yes,
okay.
It will. And I'm trying not to sugarcoat things with them because they're going to know, regardless of the outcome, what's going to happen. And, we just take it in strides. So for now, Raven's okay. We don't go beyond that.
That. Yeah, because you mentioned to me that there's 3 different types of this disorder, and Raven has the one that is the most severe.
Yes.
And that because it affects many things. So as you mentioned, Raven is hearing impaired, that it can affect your development. It also affects, it can affect like your kidneys and many, what other things does this disorder impact on your daughter?
So she has joint issues. So she has high tone, which means that, she can't extend her she can't extend her arms fully. She can't extend her knees fully. She has very tight, rigid muscles that sometimes keep her really crunched up and hunched over. She has microcephaly. She has global developmental delay. As I said, she's also visually and hearing impaired. And it also has like a progeria-like effect. So it's like a faster aging process as well.
So she basically needs one-on-one care, which is why you're at home.
Yes.
And you told me that getting the one-on-one care, like the wait list is humongous.
Yeah.
What would one-on-one care look like if you were to ever be able to access that?
It would entail some sort of way that somebody could come into our house, or if she got sent over to a daycare, that the person looking after her would, make sure that she's wearing her glasses, her hearing aids, and what we call touch cues. So, just touching her hand to give her a toy
Right.
in a way so that she can anticipate that you're doing something with her instead of just, shoving a toy in her hand and being like, here you go, Raven, play with it.
So you're interacting with her.
Yeah.
So do you have any idea why this list is so long? Is it just our medical system here in Canada? Is it something that's done by independent organizations? Like, why is the wait list so long? Like, how long would somebody have to wait?
I think it's at least a year. It sounded like to me anyways, but I think that it's this difficult to get one because there's lack of resources and lack of funding and lack of people willing to join that type of workforce, which is a bit of a pain.
Yeah. Would you?
I don't know. I had considered it actually, but it would be something I could consider for sure, I think. But I'm going to need to do it quick.
Right. What are the qualifications? Have you ever even found out? Like,
I have not.
Is it just regular nurses, or they have to have another specialty on top of being like a nurse? Is this something that just a caregiver could do?
No, because I think that like regular caregivers, like nursing support provide, like the actual nursing stuff. So if you needed a catheter, they would do that, or change your feeding tube and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a one-on-one support, especially through like a daycare system, are more like a CEA type qualification. And then you would have to go beyond your CEA and get like, I'm not even sure what kind of training that would be. Like,
right. So just not very many people want to do this. So I know that you've done some research in some of the groups that you're in.
Yes.
And some of the information has come to you maybe by way of just interacting with other parents in this situation. Can you tell us, what is it going to look like? How will you know that Raven has begun her transition?
That's how I interpreted it. So I don't know. It's not going to be the same for everybody, especially anybody with the same disorder. But, when I am part of the pages that I'm on, it often sounded like a lot of the children started experiencing a lot of like sleeping periods where they could sleep like 15 to 20 hours a day with very short wake periods between, and then they would go back to sleep. Or in another situation, a lot of the kids seem to kind of experience a lot of like UTI type symptoms, which was pretty clear indication of like kidney disease.
Kidney failing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So when Raven is going to transition, some of the things that you'll be looking for is that she will be sleeping much longer than she would, and then her kidneys might begin to shut down.
Potentially, yeah.
Right. So you and your husband have planned for what will happen when your daughter transitions. How has that brought you closer as a family and tested your strength? And what are the plans, if you don't mind sharing that?
So my husband, because we have said my husband is Indigenous, so he does have some beliefs. I've asked him specifically, but he can't tell me what they are because he's not so sure. So I will have to probably eventually reach out to his parents to get some more clarification. But, in a way, I think it made us closer because we're on the same page. We know what to expect. We know now what we want to happen to our daughter when the time comes. And, it's not an easy conversation to have, obviously, and a conversation we never thought as parents we would have to even make.
Yeah.
So I guess we're lucky in that way that, our laid backness, made it so easy for us to talk about it without, screaming and crying and, breaking down in front of each other. It was a conversation that was, was quick. It was calm.
Right.
And we got it done.
Yeah. And you don't know what will happen in the moment. So I was wanting my children to join soccer. Yeah. So I'd taken them right on Dilworth. There's a park there where they do the trials. And my oldest daughter was still in the hospital then. And I remember after my other two children had their trials, and we were just like so excited for them that they're going to join the soccer team and they're going to do really well. and they'd really apply themselves during the trials. They just really wanted to be noticed and to be drafted on the team, so to speak. When I was leaving the parking lot is when I received the phone call that I have to come to the hospital because they don't think that my daughter would last the night. And so when I think about your conversations that you've had, I thank God that you have been able to have that moment. You're never going to know what will happen then. But that's one of the things for my daughter that night, nothing happened. But you can imagine just the tension and the stress of just, what do you say? And I remember going to the hospital and I wanted her to know that she had done well, that in the 24 years that she'd been here, she had fought the good fight. She had run a good race. And I was able to tell her that on that day. And I think in many ways it gave her permission to leave. Yeah. So I think there's such value in being able to have that discussion before the fact. The thing that I would change for my daughter is because it didn't happen that day, and it happened probably a couple of weeks after that day, is knowing that I would have wanted to engage like a death doula and brought her home. Yeah. There was no need for her to be at the hospital. We could have said more. We could have shared more. Those little moments that she was up. Yeah. I could have. I just didn't want her to be there. But it's one of those things like you can't redo it. So if I'm to give you any advice today is make those last moments very intentional for you and your family. Thank you. There are no do-overs, and just make sure that you tell her how she has impacted you as a mother and how she has brought joy to your family. You described Raven as a white beacon of light. Yes. And you married that to how people respond to her in this community. Yeah. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So in some Indigenous cultures, it's believed that the raven was the one that brought the light to the world. Yeah. And, it's funny because Raven was about 5 days old when we finally decided on her name. And, I kind of was like, I don't know, maybe we should change it. And then I was like, you know what? No, it's fine. It's already been 5 days. Let's just go with it. So we decided on it and said it that way. A lot of the times when we go out in public, as I said, Raven is so tiny for her age that, sometimes she has actually been mistaken for a doll. Oh. And a lot of times we get like the little old ladies who see her and they just love her. She's like, oh, I think they know when they see her that there is something different about her. Yeah. But, she will sit there and she'll look around. Sometimes she'll coo, sometimes she'll smile, and she just catches people's attention. I don't know why, she just does. And people, they look at me, they'll rub my arm and they'll be like, oh, you're a good mom, or, your daughter's beautiful, all the best to you, God bless you type stuff. And
so you see Raven's purpose.
Yeah.
And how the community engages her and the light that she brings to people that don't even know her.
Yeah. And, I've seen people walk away with big smiles on their faces, and it's weird because even when I had the other 3 girls as babies, I didn't really get that much attention from them. But then, we walk around with Raven. Sometimes my oldest will hold her and people will be like, oh my gosh, you're such a good big sister. And, it's beautiful. She's brought some really different things to my life that I never really would have expected to see at all. Like attention from
what things?
From strangers, and being able to sit here and talk to you, and the other conversations that I've had with other organizations. And I thank her for that, because in a way she has made me stronger without, sometimes I don't even realize it. So
until those moments happen. Yeah. And her being that white beacon of light, the light shines on you too. Yeah. And then you realize that she's brought strength. You said something when we spoke. You said you don't know how you're going to live without her.
I don't. And, that's, I think, kind of the anticipatory grief aspect of this whole thing. You know,
Yeah.
you just, you know, I look at her and she snuggles in the crook of my arm all the time. It's like the perfect little spot for her. And, you know, when I think about it, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to sit on the couch and her not be there. I don't know how I'm going to wake up in the morning and not have her in my bed. I don't know how it's going to be. And it's really scary.
Yeah.
Probably the scariest part about it.
Is even if you've planned, even if you've talked about it, even if there was no fussing in that, but there's still the unknown.
Yeah.
The part that you don't know.
And I think that's probably the hardest part, because you can't explain it to people unless they've been through it. Because how do you sit there and say, oh, I'm waiting for my child to die?
Yeah.
It's not nice conversations to have with people. And, you know, I don't think that people really want to have those conversations, but
it's a reality.
It is
for someone like you and many other people that you have encountered in the groups that you're in, that this is their reality.
Yeah.
They're raising their children to die.
Yeah. And there's nothing that can really prepare you for it. You can put up the strongest wall you have, but it's going to come down at some point.
Yeah. I pray that when that moment comes for you, that you will allow the wall to come down, because it is an essential part of grief. And as a grieving mother, I know that your grief has already started. Yeah. And grief just doesn't go away.
No.
It doesn't go away. And I think my part that I feel that can give me peace after our conversation today is that you have found purpose. And I truly believe that this purpose that Raven came to give you, you will carry it on even after Raven is gone.
I hope so. I'm going to have to fight for something.
Yeah. And you will continue to fight the good fight. I want to talk about what parts of yourself, your dreams, have you had to let go to reshape your life to meet the needs of your daughter?
I guess, we had to forego things. As a family with such a disabled child, that we can't, plan a trip and go fly somewhere, because we just don't really know how her health is going to be.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get stuck in another country.
Yeah.
And get forced to pay thousands of dollars to have to bring her back, or for medical care costs. So, as a family, our vacations have just turned into, we have to go to Vancouver for medical appointments. So let's make a trip out of it.
So then you just take everyone along, make it into a road trip. Meanwhile, Raven has to do blood work, or has to go see some specialist about something.
Yeah.
That's really difficult. It really is. I know that you and your husband play slow pitch baseball.
Yes.
How has that helped you and your husband to find some normalcy and joy in the midst of everything?
It helps a great deal, because we get to step out onto the field and we feel like there's nothing wrong in our lives. We're there to go hang out with our friends, have a drink or two, play a game, sometimes even two.
Yeah.
And, we get to hang out for a couple hours and not really have to focus on the weight that is already in our lives. So, the kids can go play freely. Sometimes Raven gets passed around between our ball friends, and, people want to see her and hug her.
And maybe that's all the family that Raven needs. I know that, even though your immediate family might not support you in the way that you would like, but there are these pieces of what may not be, a family that, people expect, but you have all these people that have become family. And so that's amazing. So I wanted us to just talk about a couple more things before we wrap up today. When you think about the time that you have with your daughter now, what are the moments you treasure the most?
The smiles and the coos, to be honest. I know it's simple little things, but she's changed so much too, and I think she's not quite lost those abilities, but they're just not as frequent as they used to be. You know, I'd pick her up like a little, 6-month-old baby, and she'd smile, and sometimes she would coo. My favorite thing, actually, she used to touch my face. She would hold my face in her hands. She doesn't really do that anymore, though. So those are, I think, just going to be some of the little things that are always going to stick.
When you had them, you treasure them, but you will miss them.
Yeah.
And so if you could speak to yourself on the day you received the diagnosis, knowing all that you know now, what would you say to that version of yourself?
I would tell myself, that it's okay to be emotional, to feel it, to cry if I have to, because I, as a not super emotional person as it is sometimes, I should have allowed myself to grieve then and carry on, and then grieve as needed, and instead of just holding back. Yeah. You just got to pick up and go, especially when you have 3 other kids who are already, well aware of the life that's, going on around them. Yeah. So I would have told myself, shut myself in a bathroom, let it out for a few minutes, pick myself up, get back to it. Yeah.
You sharing your incredible journey of resilience and sharing Raven's story. What is it that you're hoping that when someone listens to this podcast, Raven's legacy would be, and your resilience as a mom, as a sister, as a wife?
I think I would tell people that you're not alone. You may feel like it, but you're not alone. There are millions of people that are going through things that we can't even imagine. I would look back on our diagnosis, and I would tell somebody, if you're going through it, speak up and let hopefully your surrounding people help you through it. Don't go through it alone, because you're not going to get anywhere doing it alone.
Right.
You need support.
Ask for help.
Yes.
And grieve if you need to. Cry if you need to.
Yes.
Right. You are not alone. I really believe that we aren't alone. And I believe that sharing stories like this will resonate with many people, and that they will indeed see that they're not alone. So I want to give these last moments to you. Remember when we spoke, I said, if there's anything that you're like, Angelina, it's your podcast, but I am not living this place without saying what I want to say. What is it that I haven't asked you today, that we haven't talked about today, that you want to make sure that we log in this hour that we've been here chatting? And,
I actually was not really able to come up with anything, though, but I just want to, I feel like, these stories and the people who listen to these kind of stories, I think it helps, build resilience and strength in women. We hear these stories from other women. We hear many different types of stories from women. And I feel like in a way we all resonate with, all these different stories with these different people. And it helps us grow as women. It helps us become stronger. It helps us learn to advocate. It helps us learn to say what we never thought we would be able to say. By giving us that strength. So yes, I think that's kind of where I'm leaving here with, the strength to stand up and speak about difficult things.
And I agree. Thank you for your time, Susan.
Thank you so much for having me here.